Well, good morning. It is a real pleasure to be here with my very illustrious panel. Good looking too, aren't they?
Oh, thank you.
They clean up nice. So a lot of good panels this morning. We're going to take a little bit of a step back and really talk about threat to make sure that you all, as partners for not only CBP and HSI, but everybody operating in that border security space, understands what's keeping these guys up at night and what opportunities, what challenges they're trying to solve, what opportunities there are out there, and what tools they're excited about. So let's dive in. So my first question is the one that when I was at CBP, which I was for 30 years, I had to think about every day, and that is, what is keeping me up at night? So Steve, I'm going to start with you and ask you, what is it today that's keeping you up at night?
Thank you, Brenda. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. For me, I'm the executive director of the National Targeting Center. CBP's primary mission is counterterrorism, and it will remain that, right? And so the threat from terrorism certainly keeps me up at night. I mean, that's a primary focus for me as the executive director. The threat environment is very real. It's very significant. You've seen in reporting arrests that have been made here in the United States, plots that have been disrupted. So that is certainly a threat. The threat from state actors, quite honestly, these days, utilizing some of the similar means as foreign terrorist organizations is a threat. And then, of course, the threat of synthetic opioids. I mean, fentanyl is something that we do talk about a lot and has gotten a fair amount of publicity. But all synthetic opioids, nitazines, xylazines. What's happening is the drug cartels are making this stuff stronger, and there's certainly challenges that we face. I mean, I'm very proud of the women and men at the National Targeting Center who traditionally for the past 20 years have risen to those challenges and continue to do so, and sort of look forward to talking a little bit more today about how we do that and how industry can help, because it's really a partnership with industry that that we need to tackle these threats that we face.
So Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask about a particular threat. So my background is trade, and a lot of times when CBP talks about its mission set, we focus on the people coming through and the terrorism threat around cargo.
Yes.
For me, a lot of it was trade compliance.
Yep.
And our importers following the laws around forced labor or anti-dumping and countervailing duty, which I know is another thing that we enforce to protect the American public. From your perspective, where does the trade threat fall?
So certainly air cargo right now is significant, and part of that is because of visibility into the sender and receivers, of these packages. So think about, e-commerce, and I'll share a couple of statistics with you. 5 years ago, you're looking at 160 million packages coming in. Last year, 1.4 billion. Think about that, 4 million per day. Now, why does this matter to you all? And it does matter to you all because all of you get on airplanes, right? You all fly different locations. Some of you have the privilege of flying internationally and coming through U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and I hope many of you are Global Entry members. If you're not, I encourage you to be that. But when you're on that aircraft, and think about this statistic for a second, 30% of air cargo travels on passenger aircrafts. You go through an immense amount of screening and security to board that aircraft. Don't you want that same amount of scrutiny on the cargo that's beneath you on that aircraft? So when you hear discussions and debates about the amount of data that U.S. Customs and Border Protection is requesting, when it comes to de minimis shipments, those shipments under $800, there's a reason for that. Because certainly in the counter fentanyl fight, and effectively, with my partners here in HSI, we've worked with our international partners to combat some of that in the express consignment modality and in mail. Said, but there's still opportunities to move precursor chemicals. There's still opportunities to move pill press and dye sets across cargo, and that's a real threat. And so where do you and industry come into play? Because we still need trade to move quickly.
But it needs to be compliant.
But it needs to be compliant and it needs to be safe. And to your point on forced labor, without that data, it's very hard to trace that back to particular regions in certain countries, where forced labor is prevalent. And I mean, none of us want to, buy gifts for our children at the holidays that were made by forced labor. Right? And so the more information that we have, the better we all are going to be. And I think within industry, you all can operate at the speed of mission. You can make technological advances that we can't necessarily make as quickly in government because the process itself is burdensome, if you will. And so we need to work together at the earliest stages possible, to address some of these threats.
Excellent overview. Thank you. Selwyn, I'm gonna turn to you. As really the brother, the sister agency of CBP, you work hand in glove. I know with Steve and a number of other CBP colleagues. For you, what keeps you up at night?
Thank you, Brenda, for the question, and I'm happy to be here to share my thoughts. So for me, just to piggyback off of Steve, it's the cartels, it's the transnational criminal organizations that are operating in Mexico. What we've seen is all they care about is making a profit, to keep their business models flowing, and they don't care about the safety and the well-being of the American people. It's all about that dollar. And because of that, we've seen the fentanyl crisis epidemic blow up and really have a serious impact on the American population. The slogan, "One pill can kill," is real, right? And I'm sure some of the folks in this room may have experienced that through friends and family, overdoses for kids, not realizing how serious this is. And so looking at that challenge, from the supply chain, China sending precursors to Mexico, manufacturing into fentanyl, and then smuggling across the border, that's really what we, HSI, CBP, we look to attack. And so what I would tell you is, from my perspective, I think it's not just about, targeting the supply chain, but how do we look for future technologies, right, to get us ahead of these cartels and what they're doing. We've dealt with encrypted communications, we've dealt with all kind of new technologies that these cartels are willing to employ. And so now we have to stay ahead of them and figure out how to best address those concerns.
And the cartels don't have an acquisition process.
No.
That they've got to work through.
No, they do not. And again, it's about that dollar, right? And for instance, over the last several months, we've seen overdose rates decrease about 10 to 12%. And that's because that's a whole of government approach, right? It's from using pressuring China to schedule precursor drugs, from law enforcement all working together to make seizures and again, impact the precursors in Mexico before they get to the cartels and come across the border. But outreach and prevention, right? Talking to kids, letting them know one pill can kill, and providing those resources to private industry partners, right? And making sure they know their customers and when they're importing this stuff into the country. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Well, Ricardo, Selwyn, and Steve have both talked about international engagement. And I know that's your sweet spot.
That was supposed to be my area.
Yeah, well,
I'm kidding.
give us a little bit of perspective on the threat in the international.
So, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. We don't have to adjust the microphone or anything. I have an accent, so there's nothing wrong with the microphone. It's just the way I speak. Like Brenda was saying, I'm the Assistant Director for International Operations, and let me start with, before I start addressing, what we see from HSI perspective as the major threats internationally that are affecting us here in the United States. Obviously, terrorism is something that keeps me awake at night for many reasons. Probably the main one is because I was a first responder in 9/11. I was there. I saw the planes hit the Twin Towers. I was there in Ground Zero as part of the rescue effort. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what I saw. And I was a rookie agent back then, and till this day, the first dead body that I have seen during my entire career was during 9/11. And it wasn't a full body, it was a torso of a person. So obviously that keeps me awake at night every day. It has for the past 20 plus years. So that's number one. Number two, I'll say, the threat that we're seeing internationally when it comes to cartels and fentanyl poisoning, that's very personal to me and to all of us. It should be. I live in Fairfax County, and last year alone in Loudoun County, nearby, 9 kids, had to be sent to the hospital from the same high school due to fentanyl poisoning. And people talk about, I want to make the distinction, right? And I'm using the term poisoning and not overdose, because I think there has been a misconception out there that, they die or they went to the hospital because they overdose. No, there's no such a thing as an overdose of fentanyl. One pill, like Mr. Selwyn was saying, can actually kill you. Actually, half a pill can kill a kid or somebody that has never taken fentanyl in their lives. And the problem is that, what is fentanyl? People think, are the kids ordering fentanyl? No, they're not ordering fentanyl online. They're ordering what they think is Adderall or other stimulants for them, for their exams or just to feel a high or whatnot. And then they end up getting pills that are laced with fentanyl. And just a small amount of fentanyl can actually kill them. And that's what we have seen. And that's very personal, right? It has to be personal for us. We all have kids, and we all have friends and family members that have struggled with addiction. Just imagine, just one pill can kill them or put them in the hospital. So that definitely keeps me awake every night because it's hitting our communities. It's hitting us, it's hitting our neighbors, our loved ones. So that's number two. And number three, and I know we already talked about terrorism and cartel violence and fentanyl as probably the top priorities for the investigative agencies that are here present today. But one threat that I'm seeing, not only coming from foreign countries to our borders, but is being produced within our borders, and I think it continues to spread. And maybe because I just got a briefing on one of our investigations, is the what I will refer to as the exploitation of child exploitation images and child exploitation cases that we're seeing here, not only in the U.S., but coming from foreign countries to the U.S. And when I talk about child exploitation, I'm talking about, a couple of things, right? Especially when it comes to, and let me put it to you in perspective, and sorry, I'm jumping a little bit here, but, we spend all this money to protect our borders. We personally spend money on Ring cameras, on cameras to our houses, on extra bolts and security systems to our house so no stranger can come in and do harm to our families. But sometimes we fail to realize that this beautiful thing called the internet and cell phones and video games is allowing strangers to interact with our loved ones without us not knowing about. And I'm not trying to pass judgment on any of us, including myself, as to, how good are we as parents. But it continues to proliferate the amount of scams and harm that predators are doing to our family and loved ones through the internet. And this continues to explode and explodes. And the threat is not only coming from foreign countries, it's being produced here in the United States. And that's something that I feel obligated to talk more about it, because it can happen to anybody. As a matter of fact, my daughter a couple of months ago, even though she has gone to every presentation that HSI provides, was approached by a stranger online, asking and bringing sexual themes to the conversation, and she immediately told me about it. But it can happen to anybody. But the key to this is we have to talk about it with our kids. We cannot be afraid of engaging our loved ones into those uncomfortable conversations, because it's out there. There's a lot of kids being scammed. Hey, teenage boys, right? We see it all the time. Hey, some girl all of a sudden is inviting them, to join them in social media. Pretty picture one night, and the boy gets all excited. All of a sudden, the kid is sending pictures of himself naked and whatnot. Next thing you know, that girl is not a girl. It's a predator. It's a pedophile. Now selling those pictures out on the internet, or trying to get money and blackmail that kid who sent those pictures. It happens every day in the United States. And those threats are not only coming from foreign, but are being produced here. A lot of sexually explicit pictures of children are being exchanged within the U.S. and being sent abroad, and vice versa. And that's something that, as a parent, but you don't have to be a parent to be scared or worry about it. It's something that we all need to be worried about, and we need to talk about it. Because if we don't talk about that, somebody's going to be talking to our kids about it, and it can harm them. So those are the things that...
Scary stuff.
It is.
Really scary stuff. Thank you,
Well,
the three of you, for really giving us a picture of kind of what that next level down is. Some of this doesn't get the high-profile press. Some of it does. My microphone is not working. Is that right? Okay. All right. I want to do a quick lightning round. If you had to name your top challenge in managing these threats, what would it be? Selwyn, I'm going to start with you, because then we're going to move on to what are the opportunities and partnerships that can help you solve that challenge.
All right, I'll try to be quick because Ricardo was very lengthy there. But besides fentanyl, the number one challenge I have right now that everyone can probably appreciate is dealing with Tren de Aragua, which is TDA, the Venezuelan gang that's kind of migrated through South America and now here in the United States. That's a challenge because under my mission space, I have our national gangs and violent crimes unit. So I deal with the strategy for HSI to kind of attack or combat this organization. And so it's a challenge because this group is not like other transnational gangs that we've had to deal with, like MS-13 and SIR 13 and other gangs. We use our removal process to send these folks when they commit a crime in the U.S. back to whatever country they come from. The issue with this group is we don't have a relationship with Venezuela. And so now it's where do we send these folks without locking them up for a crime they've committed or detaining them for a certain amount of time. At a certain point, they have to either be released or we have to find a way to get them to another country outside the United States. So in dealing with this organization, I have to deal with not only the strategy on mitigating the violence, the other crimes that they commit in the US, but also figuring out ways with our partners, what we do with them once we have them, once they've served time or some type of incarceration. What do we do with them once they're done, and where do we put them? So.
Okay, great, thank you. Ricardo, I'm going to ask you next. Lightning round. What's your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge as an investigator is the management of the investigative data that we're collecting. And I know, I'm preaching to the choir here because I know we have the private sector very well represented here, but that has become the biggest challenge for our agency and for every other investigative agency out there. The amount of collections that we do, what do we do with it? How do we analyze it? So that is something that, to me, it's something that we need to address better.
That's a great answer. Steve.
So I would simply say the ability to operate at the speed of mission, right? Because the threat changes, to Smitty's point about TDA, significant threat that we're addressing. And, I give credit to our CTO, Sunil, and our whole OIT at CBP that is able to operate as quickly as possible, but still, because of the procurement process, because of some of those items that are baked in, the technology that we may procure, it advances quicker than our ability to procure it. And so that's why with industry, it's important for us sort of to work hand in hand at the earliest point possible. I know there's a lot of discussion on artificial intelligence, for instance, and that is something that we have to leverage. And I mean, you think about, Ricardo's point about the amount of data. I mean, the CBP processes transactionally an immense amount of data, and we do it at scale, right? But there are opportunities within there to leverage, artificial intelligence, both machine learning, which we have done effectively, I think, for 10 to 15 years now, but also, generative AI and large language models, but doing that responsibly, and this is where I would also challenge industry. There's an ethical component to this, right? Just because we can do something doesn't mean, we should do it. And I think there's opportunities for us to work together to leverage that, because to your point, Brenda, earlier, the cartels, the bad actors, those that want to cause us harm, they're not constricted by things, and they are operating, very quickly, and it becomes challenging to stay one step ahead of that. And that's why this partnership between government and industry is so critical for us to move forward in the future.
I think you've raised a lot of good themes there. And I'm going to give Pat Flynn the opportunity to open on our next question. So Pat, we've heard a lot about the threat. We've heard a lot about the challenges. But we also know there's not only a room full of people, there's a city full of people that are looking to help the government with those threats. Can you talk to us at a high level? What are some of the tools and opportunities that we have to partner on?
Thank you to HSDF on the invitation to participate, and thank you, Brenda. She used to keep me out of trouble back when I was a young Border Patrol agent when I was at headquarters, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I look at it three main thrusts, mainly as intelligence analysis, data, and situational awareness. I think that, especially when you're talking about CBP, the data, how we develop software, how we support Gen AI, and being able to responsibly, as Steve mentioned, to put that together so we only push out the data to certain form factors to the organizations that need it. HSI, if it's the NTC, or if, part of that biometric triad, pushing it to DOD or the IC. Being able to utilize that form factor of data without violating privacy, and so they can make their decisions. The other thing I'd like to stress is the situational awareness through the use of surveillance. Being able to protect the, last I knew it's 5,000 linear land miles of border out there. How do you surveil that? How do you push the border out? These are all themes that Chief Aguilar and the crew will be very familiar with, but that's still a threat. The infrastructure to be able to communicate securely. And then finally, next generation stuff, post-quantum and all those sorts of things. How do we deal with that animal as it approaches us in the very near future?
That's a great overview, and I think a lot of opportunity in those various areas, but you've laid them out quite nicely. Thank you very much. So Ricardo, I'm gonna turn to you next and ask you about what tools and opportunities do you see with the different threats that you've walked us through?
So thank you for the question. The opportunities that I see are, we have to do better as an investigative agency, like I mentioned before, on how do we go about analyzing and using technology. There's cameras everywhere. Everybody's on their phones constantly. How do we manage all that data? How do we go about analyzing it? How can we have not only technology, AI doing the analysis, but how can we make it succinct enough or to process the data in such a way that is comprehensive and easy to understand for investigators? You got to understand. I mean, I'm an experienced investigator. Selwyn, all of us are, right? We've been in this field for a long time, but we're not techies. We're not necessarily savvy on technology. So one of the challenges that I have seen is how do you convert all those analytical tools and make it in a way that can translate and make sense not only to us investigators, but the prosecutors, because the prosecutors are lawyers, and that doesn't necessarily make them, techies either, right? So how do you process that data in a comprehensive way that we can actually use and present to a jury of our peers? And that has been the biggest challenge that one of the biggest challenges that we face.
I think that is in a very concise user requirement, is how do you present a very complex issue with very complex data, and usually a lot of entities within the problem you're trying to solve. How do you present that in a simple way that makes sense not only to the investigator, but also to those that have to take action further up the chain? Thank you. Steve, what tools are you looking for in your world?
Well, I mean, we do manage a massive amount of data at the National Targeting Center. We leverage that very effectively, to target bad actors, to perform screening and vetting, to ensure that, for instance, air cargo is safe, and we have the air cargo advanced screening program with data elements. We've worked very closely with industry in the past few months, expanding the data elements that we're collecting, and so it would be helpful, I think, sometimes for industry to work, with our industry partners in the express consignment world to be able to better deliver that data to CBP in a way that's efficient and effective. Because what that allows us to do is more surgically target the threat. The more data that we have and able to leverage that data, the better able we are to target. That allows commerce to move freely. That allows people to move quickly. And so opportunities, and I made mention of this with generative AI, is to leverage that responsibly. DHS, is leading this effort, across, our components. And it's really a space, I think, where we need to work together, and we need to work together, as I mentioned earlier, at the earliest point possible, so that the solutions work, if you will. And that's why I really do. I see this as as a strong partnership.
So, following up on that theme of partnership, Selwyn, I'm going to ask you, and then Pat, to talk a little bit about the critical partnerships that really matter in trying to solve this issue.
Sure. Besides the partnerships that we have, obviously with CBP and other federal partners, one agency can't solve all these issues that we deal with. It's a combined effort from the U.S. government, whole of government approach. The partnerships with our private industry folks, working hand in hand with them, developing these tools that we were talking about that can address some of our problem sets that we have in our mission space. And we are actually doing that now. We have several projects, and I'm sure probably some of you vendors here now that are in the room we're working with. But to again collaborate together and kind of working across instead of worrying about bottom lines and everything else, but looking to really protect the American people and ensure public safety. And in credit to some of those vendors, they've come together and worked through some of the difficulties and in their business models to kind of work with government to do that. So that's what I see.
I love that because I mean, we know these are complex challenges and there's not a single bullet solution, right? So whether it's a capability that has to be joined to another capability,
Exactly.
whether it's an area of expertise, and it's not just about the technology, right?
Yeah.
It's about the program management. It's about the collaboration with the business community that don't provide tools, but they do have expertise and information. And so I like the vision you've projected for solving a complex problem with a network of partnerships. So, Pat, how do you work within that partnership network?
Good question. We perform across the government in a lot of different places, but one of the ones I want to highlight, and I talked to you about this earlier today, was the OCDEF task force. That's a good example where integrators and companies participate and provide information to those that really need it in various different form factors. The IC, back to CBP. CBP pushes tons of data to OCDEF, tons. And being able to support the organizations from an analytical standpoint to keep them left of boom as much as possible. I think that's a really, really important form factor, especially when you're battling the fentanyl crisis and trade. How do you secure that flow of whatever you have coming into this country in a way that what's coming before it even gets there? Econify the process.
I think we've heard that a couple times today, that really, if you figure out your problem when it's at the border, you've lost, right? You got to figure it out before. And for that, you need not only the data and the expertise, but you need the engagement of importers, exporters, customs brokers, freight forwarders, as well as these tools that give you the visibility into what's happening as it's coming at us, or even before that. So let me ask you, we've just got maybe time for one more panel question, and then we're going to turn to you all for questions. Steve, what is the top thing on your wish list? If you could be king for the day and purchase, develop, evolve, get one thing, what would it be?
No, there's many things I want. I think, for me, and I hate to keep hammering this home, but in that sort of generative AI space, right? Because I use a lot of personnel to, for instance, distill what the threat is we're facing. And the threat is different throughout the country as well. And then delivering that threat information to our frontline officers and agents who are making the difference. And I think we very effectively leverage machine learning in CBP and in our targeting efforts. But I do think there's great opportunity to use generative AI to distill down much of this data that we have. And I'm not just talking about unique pieces of data. I'm talking about documented inspections that we've done, et cetera, and our ability to distill that down to proactively identify TTPs that may not just be in one location, but apply to many locations. So I would say that's probably my highest on my wish list, and then the corollary to that wish list is that the procurement process were a little bit quicker and easier to get there.
Ricardo, what's the number one thing on your wish list?
AI, for sure, machine learning, more data analytical tools, and more personnel to.
Oh, that's more. That's
Yeah.
too many.
Well,
Yeah.
but
And
because
expensive.
here's
Yeah.
my personal opinion, right?
Yeah.
We cannot be overly reliant on AI
Yeah.
and machine learning. You still need that investigator out there to go through the data. A lot of times I've seen how data criminal analysts that have not interviewed, let's say, a subject of an investigation, go just by what they're reading on the report of investigation, and then they conclude that this person had nothing to do. But if you ask the investigator who actually did the interview, they put that the guy is denying everything, but they know, either by the way they look, he reacted to quick questions, that the person was certainly involved in whatever crime is being investigated. So, AI, machine learning, but we need also people. We cannot overly rely on data and AI.
Diane Sabatino earlier today talked about keeping that human in the loop.
Yep.
And I think that's a priority across the board. Selwyn, it's almost Christmas.
Yeah. So I was a customs inspector for 6 years, so I know what CBP goes through inspecting a lot of cargo coming into the country. We've seen how fragile the supply chain is, right, from COVID and dealing with that whole thing. I think developing a tool that could, and again, no disrespect to the tools we already have, but I personally think we need better tools to identify when we have cargo that may be compromised or have things in them that shouldn't be in there, right? I think we need a little bit more better technology in that front. It's a needle in a haystack, and so any tool that gives us that next advantage, I think I would be invested in.
Great. Pat, if you could give one tool
Can I be?
to our colleagues, what would it be?
Something that's solutioned at an affordable price, that delivers the information that they need as quickly as they need, and I make a good profit.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair. Yeah, because in this space, whichever side, whether you're private sector, public sector, there's never enough time, there's never enough resources, and we need those solutions that kind of balance all those things. So, excellent.
And the solutions, Brenda, are in this room. I mean, and I think, yes, we serve in government, and we take an oath and we take it seriously, and we're committed to the mission. But I want to thank all of you too, because some of the brightest minds with the solutions are sitting right in front of me, and it's not like we can do it without you. So you are just as much a part of that mission, and I'm certainly grateful to you, not only as the executive director of the National Targeting Center, but as a husband and a dad, and the work that you do. I mean, it's in your name, as far as this forum and symposium. And so you care about Homeland Security and Homeland Defense, and I'm grateful to you, on that level, and just want to thank all of you for not only the work that you've done up to this point, but the work that you'll continue to do, and ideally the work that we'll be able to do together to ensure that kids aren't dying from fentanyl poisoning, and that we're tackling Tren de Aragua, and that it's key, but it's a partnership with you all.
I think that's very well said, and great recognition of the importance of the partnership between the government and the private sector. So with that, we're going to turn to you, and I know you're hungry, and we're getting very close to lunch, but if you have a question or two, I see a hand in the back, familiar face back there. Mr. Mullen?
Thanks very much. I'm Mike Mullen. I'm the executive director of the Express Association of America that represents DHL and FedEx and UPS. And full transparency, I worked for several years at CBP. I was the assistant commissioner for international affairs, and I had some terrific employees there. CBP is a great organization. But I wanted to say how much I appreciated XD Maloney's comments about partnership, because we take our partnership with CBP extremely seriously. You mentioned the increase in the ACAS data.
Yeah.
The number of data elements tripled.
Yes.
And we were providing all of that information within 1 week after the requirement was identified this summer. We screen 100% of what goes on our airplanes. So it's that partnership with you that is really important to us to complete our operations successfully and also comply with your mission. But the one question I wanted to ask was, I was a little surprised there was no mention of the post office today. Could you say anything about how you're enforcing all these requirements on postal shipments?
Yeah, so the mail environment, is a challenge, and I appreciate the partnership, because certainly with the express consignment, with the DHL, FedEx, and UPS, with ACAS, we are able to action those items. For instance, if we get a suspicious shipment in ACAS, we work directly within hours, the partnership, to mitigate what we might deem as a problem with that. Mail is a bigger challenge, right? And so we have been working closely in a working group, working with the United Postal Union and the foreign postal carriers to protect that supply chain as well. But to your point, the evolution of the groups that you represent is far more advanced at this point. But it's certainly the goal of CBP and our partner agencies in DHS to work closely with not only the U.S. Postal Service, but our foreign postal carriers to ensure that same security, and we are doing that as well. But it's again that sort of operating at the speed of mission, and I'm grateful to you, and I do hope that in that additional data sets that we have been as transparent as possible from CBP's perspective. And I know initially we were having daily calls, weekly calls, and trying to be as responsive to you all that we could to ensure, and we're committed to that in CBP, that transparency of effort with industry.
And I want to say, as a participant in that process as well, that CBP has really raised the bar, I think, in terms of the transparency and the private sector partnership, which makes your job easier, we hope.
Yeah.
Time for one last question. I see a hand back here in the middle.
Thank you so much for the time. So with recent incidents in supply chain interruption, like what we saw happen with Israel and explosives in their pagers, and apparent Russia with incendiary devices in an aircraft for cargo, has that changed your policies or framework in the way that you guys are operating with either other agencies overseas or stuff internally here? Thank you.
I think that's directed at me again. I think as a whole, we can take ACAS as an example, right? ACAS was born out of the 2010 ink cartridge plot, and it's really a bomb in a box scenario, right? So we collect data elements to ensure that we know what's getting on those aircrafts prior to, and then working closely with our partners in express consignment to mitigate any of that threat. Given the events around the world, CBP remains as agile as possible and does consistently look at our requirements, our compliance efforts, even with forced labor and anti-dumping, and just out of good practices to say, do we need to leverage more? And the leverage more is, again, it's not to be burdensome. Right, and I think the more information that we are able to get, the more visibility that we have, the more surgically then we are able to target. But we're in a high threat environment. I mean, that's what I started. And that keeps me up at night. I mean, I look terrible probably because I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, worried about not only speaking to you all today, but multiple other threats. But we're constantly pivoting daily. And I really give credit to our Office of Information Technology in U.S. Customs and Border Protection, because I think they're the best in the business. I think they're the best in government. And I know I'm biased in saying that, but I truly believe that, because they are able, to pivot quickly internally and make adjustments, for us. But again, we need the private sector's help in doing that and continuing to do that, because the threat is going to continue to evolve and it's going to get more sophisticated. I don't think, 2 years ago we would, foresee even Iran and Israel, bombing each other's locations. But
I think you have raised a really important point to end on. And you talked about operating at the speed of mission. Mm-hmm. But I think an aspect in many of the solutions that we hope our audience can help us with is that the change that we are all managing, whether it is a change in the threat and the associated response, or a new policy priority. I spent a lot of time in the world of tariffs, and many of us have seen that tariffs is likely to be the word of 2025. We expect tremendous change. If the past is any indicator of what the next 4 years are likely to be like, we all have to be prepared to pivot, you use that word, on a dime, very quickly. One of the key questions that I get is, how fast can CBP implement? And we saw with ACAS, it took 2 days. Mm-hmm. And that's typically what I say when people ask me about new tariffs or new trade policy changes. How fast can CBP implement? And when I was there 4 years ago, it was 2 to 3 days. My guess is they're faster now.
It is, and we don't let sort of perfect be the enemy of good, and we will implement, and we're not arrogant enough to say that, our first solution, always works, and we make adjustments. We do in our partnership, with industry and the express consignment couriers, we listen to the feedback and we make, adjustments accordingly. And so, it goes back to partnership.
And I think good context as we work on solutions together. So I want to thank the panel. I want to thank you all. Appreciate your time, your interest, and your questions. And with that, we wish you a good day.
Good job.
No, you too. Thank you.